Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Angela Yore, and I'm the Managing Director and founder of SkyParlour, which is a fintech marketing communications consultancy. I'm your moderator today for this In Conversation. And the conversation that we're going to be having today is Global Payments 2.0, instant, real-time, and cross-border innovation payments transformation. I'll talk you through the synopsis of what we're going to discuss, because it might help you with some of your questions. And please feel free at any point to ask questions, because we will be answering as many questions as we can at the end. But our senior panel here of experts will assess how our instant payments are being rolled out in Europe and elsewhere. And we're going to talk about how the adoption levels are across the world, and some use cases, and the role that fintechs is playing in this space, and how the adoption and use of instant payments is likely to play out. So I'll just quickly go through our panel of experts. So we have Basak Toprak, who's head of Europe eCommerce Solutions, Wholesale Payments at JP Morgan. We have Vikesh Patel, who's Swift's head of UK and Ireland. We have Clowes, who's the chairman of FS Horizons Fintech and Digital Banking. And finally, we have Myles Stephenson, who is CEO of Modulr Finance. I think, you know, although I've given the introductions here, I think it would be good for us to hear from each of our panelists now. So if we can start with Basak, and if you can just tell us a little bit about your role at JP Morgan, and also what most excites you about what your organization is doing at the minute in these areas.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Angela. Hi, everyone. I'm responsible for e-commerce solutions in Europe for JP Morgan Wholesale Payments. I've been in transaction banking for over 20 years, primarily in roles building and customizing solutions for companies for payments and liquidity management. Within JP Morgan e-commerce solutions, we work with new economy and high growth technology companies globally to customize and implement payment solutions really across the payment spectrum, from card acquiring through to supplier payments, which include, of course, the topic of today, instant payments, but also open banking, as well as wallets enabled by APIs. As part of my role, I work very closely with companies and help them set up payment structures that support their growth globally. And what's exciting is even though they could be based and located in different countries, really their main objectives are the same: automating their operations, reducing costs, and improving their customer and supplier experience. Great to be part of this discussion today. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vikesh, would you like to give us a little more detail about yourself?
Hi, thanks, Angela, and it's wonderful to be here. Thank you to the organisers of the virtual PAY360 for the invite, and it's great to be here with such distinguished panellists. So my name is Vikesh. I head up Swift in the UK and Ireland. My job is to manage all of our commercial client-facing activities in the region, so I get to be a payments geek and get to talk to customers about trends, future direction of travel strategy, and get paid for that. So it's not a bad place to be.
That's wonderful, doing something you enjoy and getting paid for it, Vikesh. So Ian, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Well, indeed. Thanks, Angela. Welcome everyone to the panel. I'm Clowes, the chairman of FS Horizons, which is a sort of advisory and a digital banking platform helping banks and non-banks get into the digital world. My past history, I spent most of my early career in banking, both for Lloyds Bank, Abbey National and Santander, ending up as director of payments. So I've been on the banking and corporate life side. Last 10 years, though, I've focused on building a fintech called Payment Cloud Technologies. I probably started about the same time as Myles, so we were pioneers back then before they used the word fintech. And recently we built that, moving from payments probably in 2009, 10, 11, then pivoted in about 2013 and 14 into digital banking when cloud technology really came to the fore, and we launched one of the first public cloud eco banks called the Change Account. Last couple of years, we built up a great fintech business, and we merged with Tuxedo back in 2018 and formed Omnio. And I led that merger for a year and then moved into more portfolio career over the last 12 months, working with fintechs as part of FS Horizon and other NED roles, really helping people in Europe, UK and globally drive into the digital world.
Thank you, Ian. And last but not least, Myles.
Great, thank you, Angela, and great to join the panel. As already said, I'm Myles Stephenson. I'm the CEO and founder of a business called Modulr. We describe ourselves as a digital alternative to commercial and wholesale transaction banking. We bring together technology platform, largely API focused, together with authorization as an e-money institution, and thirdly, access to the payment networks and wherever possible, direct access, which includes being one of the few non-bank FIs that have direct access to the Bank of England, including direct settling participation of faster payments and backs. And we take that to market broadly in three ways. Firstly, focus on B2B payments automation. Secondly, enabling our partners to embed payments in their platforms. And then thirdly, as an infrastructure or plumbing layer to enable clients to build on top of us.
Great. So it gives us the opportunity to really get into the discussion now. And I think I'll start with Vikesh. So Vikesh, how are instant payments being rolled out in Europe and elsewhere, in your opinion? What would you give it out of 10?
So, I mean, I think what we're seeing is instant payment schemes being rolled out at pace, not just across Europe, but across the globe, and also renewals of existing schemes. So you see both of those trends happening somewhat in parallel. Now, if I do a quick round the world, not quite as quick as kind of Phileas Fogg in 80 days, but maybe just take a kind of key look at some of the moving parts. You know, we can see that in Europe, there are 22 domestic real-time payment schemes, 10 of those in non-Euro countries, 12 in countries within the Eurozone, and a degree of harmonization that's happening through SEPA, instant credit transfer guidance that was issued, and minimum requirements within that framework. The UK clearly has had faster payments for a decade and continues to grow in volume. We look at the US and, you know, the work there and the market dynamic there. We see instant schemes there, as well as FedNow and various other things that are being looked at in the US. And then moving out to Asia, we see again a number of kind of instant schemes operating, whether that's fast in Singapore, Thailand with Prompt Pay, Malaysia with PayNet, Hong Kong with faster payment system, and India and Australia with MPPP. These are just to name a few. There are many, many more across the globe. So really, we're seeing it evolve. We're seeing it move at pace. And why? I think that's because the user experience of wanting frictionless, instant transfer of payments, as we are seeing services and value, so value following the physical delivery of goods and services. And I think that's a trend we're just going to continue to see over the coming years and months. So yeah, and if I look at, just to end globally, so I've given you a regional build-up. Globally, we've seen since 2018 an increase of 14 new schemes. So, you know, we now see somewhere, according to some data, jumped up to somewhere in the order of 54 or so kind of schemes that we're kind of seeing around the world.
Well, I went on that journey with you. I don't know how anybody else is going to follow that, but maybe Myles, maybe you can sort of add some of what you're seeing to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've been on the journey in the UK, and the journey for us has been about getting closer to the infrastructure so that we can realise all of the benefits to our clients. So we started as what I might describe in as an indirect participation, leveraging someone else's infrastructure through to a traditional agency banking capability, now through to direct access. And that has enabled us to really get to all of the benefits that Vikesh describes in terms of being able to deliver user experiences that are aligned with digital services, digital capability. And for us, that's the core, is being able to, the core of the service is matching what is required in a digital environment, digital age, aligned with the payment experience, even to simple capabilities like notifications. The money moves real time, and all the messaging happens real time, and you can confirm that the funds have arrived, so that consumers get the comfort, or businesses get the comfort that the money has arrived, and that can really improve even basic experiences around the notification, and really enabling and supporting reduction in customer care support costs, because there's just that simple notification. So yeah, we're seeing multiple use cases beyond that, and perhaps we can come on to that later in the call. But that sort of basic notification experience aligned to digital services is what we're seeing and delivering.
So just a sort of, extending from what you said there, Basak, do you think that payments is catching up with the digitization of life that we've been experiencing now for, or the best part of 15 to 20 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the evolution of payments towards instant payments have really driven what's happening around us in terms of consumer behavior, and corporates and financial institutions adopting these payment options. And I think we are seeing increase in terms of adoption of instant payments, and the adoption is in some markets greater than others. So if we look closer to the market here in terms of SEPA, for example, within Netherlands, SEPA instant adoption has surpassed 1 million per day, and in France, 500,000 processed per month. So these are some really good, encouraging numbers, and we're seeing adoption across European landscape increase over time. I think there will be additional factors to the adoption in terms of pickup of open banking, and we're seeing really the benefits of open banking emerging with different use cases, as well as the EBA initiative in terms of request to pay. Again, we look forward to the development there. Later this year, request to pay will be launching. So all of these additional initiatives across the European landscape will drive further adoption of instant payments.
Yeah, so the picture's looking good. The picture, we'd say we're at 7 out of 10. There's still, plenty of places to go yet before we're as quick as the rest of the digital world. But then we also have to balance that with security and, customer demands. But Ian, what about blockchain? Do you see any disruption with blockchain and instant payments here?
Yes, I see significant disruption coming from blockchain and DLS, but it's a timing issue, and it's all down to compliance. Just to pick up on the rest of the panel's points, I think you're right, there's been good progress made over the last few years, but as we know in Europe, it does take a long time, because one size doesn't fit all. You've got to get the major banks on board, and you look at countries like India who've sort of leapfrogged in the instant payment platforms, and suddenly the culture has suddenly driven that as well. So they're ahead of us already, and you go back 5 years, they were behind us. So I think there's a long way to go in Europe on that side. But blockchain, I think, is going to be a big opportunity. It will come at a cost. We know that blockchain is a fraction of the cost, and therefore one thing we didn't pick up on the panel there was it's great having a new platform, Swifter driving it along with the other major banks. It's great what we've done with Myles in terms of getting direct access, fintechs, but I know it's been a long, hard road for Myles to get there. It's still going to be tough for fintechs to get in there. So I do believe that blockchain, if you can really get its own interoperability issues out, because again, that market is slightly fragmented, then it can make a big dent, especially on the cross-border side, because if they can link up the blockchain opportunities and make it a fraction of the cost, then there can be serious disruption in this market.
Absolutely. So you know, you guys are seeing so much. You've got so much insight into what's going on. You're talking to a variety of different players. So, you know, to impress you guys will be difficult, which is why I'm asking you, I guess, is, you know, what use cases are you seeing for instant payments that you're seeing bring the most value to the customer? And perhaps, Myles, you can answer this in terms of what you're seeing at Modulr, and how, you know, how you're seeing, you know, the aids and the way that business banking perhaps is being transformed with real-time and instant payment.
Yeah, sure, certainly. As I mentioned previously, I think we're seeing if you like, the core automation, so B2B payments around receivables, payables, and the fact that we can integrate that more tightly into accounting software, ERP systems, so that money flowing in can be immediately notified into those platforms, reconciled and controlled, and also on payout, whether it's payables, payroll, disbursements, the fact that the data flow back can be real-time or instant enables those platforms to be updated in real time, and therefore you're not having to deal with either lots of manual process or complicated automated process. There's a straight flow through of data. And then we're seeing, to give I guess some specific examples of where we're seeing value starting to come out, I think being able to build on top of instant payments and build around it. Request to pay was mentioned, and open banking with payments initiation, I think is a great use case where through payments initiation you can initiate a payment out of an account using faster payments to push it into another account, and where we've managed to, if you like, close loop that end-to-end payments initiation with Modulr into a Modulr account to give a real-time notification enables you to absolutely provide a genuine real-time alternative to debit card, which can be, yes, lower cost, which merchants are always interested in, but the fact that you can move the settlement real time and we can get the real time notification and reconciliation really does give a superior process. And we're seeing other use cases in lending where the real time flow of funds enables us to deduct repayments or deduct commissions from the flow of funds that are coming through the account. So we're seeing some real practical use cases that either are reducing costs, increasing efficiency for the people involved.
That's wonderful. You know, that it's about time as well that B2B payments, in a sense, you know, I guess caught up with what's the consumers have been demanding for you know, a while now. So, you know, good to hear. Would anybody like to answer that question from the consumer perspective?
Yes, Vikesh. Angela, maybe a comment and on what Myles was saying as well. You know, when we look at cross-border as well, you know, and Ian made a point around blockchain. And actually, at Swift, we talk about a concept around responsible innovation. And here we look at what is the business need that needs to be innovated for? What is the process system function? What is the client experience? What is the problem? And then you're somewhat agnostic to the channel that you use based on a variety of factors that allow you to meet that. And, you know, we've seen, and staying with that cross-border theme that Myles was talking about, we've innovated with the community around GPI. You know, the journey over the last 3 years, introducing end-to-end tracking, transparency, traceability, and the adoption of that service, where nearly 77 trillion has been transferred through cross-border intergroup payments in 2019, double the year before. 65% of all cross-border payments that we see are sent via GPI. We see 50% of those being credited within 30 minutes, many of those within minutes, nearly 100% within 24 hours. You know, all of that innovation that we've brought around that cross-border space with the community answers a lot of kind of the previous frictions and challenges that were there. But equally, we're not stopping there. We're looking, and you talked about innovations in instant schemes. One use case I wanted to talk about very briefly is connecting cross-border to instant, which we have piloted in Swift for probably the last 2 years, starting in 2017 with Asia and 3 corridors, cross-border corridors, settling in AUMPP in Australia, building that and bringing that closer to home last year with tips, and work we're doing at the moment with Pay.uk and Vocalink and banks to try and do that in the UK as well. So that use case is very powerful for corporates, being able to have a channel that is quick, frictionless, and actually allows for cross-border payments to be connected into a domestic scheme.
Yes, you might want to talk a little bit about the video that you have that shows that tracking and traceability from Asia to Boston, right through to Manchester. Have you seen the video that I'm talking about, Vikesh?
I have, yes. I mean, yes, yeah. So no, I mean, for people here, it's on our website. It's and it's all available through the APIs and the integration that GPI allows the financial institution that's signed up and subscribed to take the data and expose it to their customers. But in effect, it's like, you can track the payment, which is kind of, the whole point of GPI. You can see where it is along its journey. You can see it move around kind of various intermediaries on its journey, potentially the amount of fees that may be taken along by various people and parties in that chain. You can see how long it's been at a particular bank before it's been moved on. And that level of transparency that has been so wholeheartedly taken on by the communities drive massive innovation in back-end processing, real-time processing, and user experience. So, for those who want to see, what I think as a payment geek, a pretty cool video, it's on the Swiss website.
Thank you. So, Basak, what are you seeing? What is JP Morgan seeing?
Yeah, sure. So the use cases we're seeing really range from some of the traditional service sectors, for example, insurance claims, but also, of course, extending to gig economy payments and marketplace payments as well. So it's really we see the most uptake in terms of instant payments in the B2C or business to small business sector in terms of beneficiary of funds. And the driver is really for these companies to switch to instant payments is customer experience. And when we say customer, we also include suppliers in there as well. So for companies making these payments, as Myles mentioned, ability to receive instant confirmation is key, because that cuts down on manual costs related to calls into customer services, tracking, etc. So that's a big part of the driver for instant payment adoption. So companies who are leveraging these solutions are typically those that are very familiar with implementing API-based solutions. API and instant payments obviously go hand in hand to really enable a kind of seamless, no-touch kind of operation, 24/7 solution. So in fact, when we look at companies, especially the high growth technology companies who are just going into, making payments, they are leapfrogging, typical ACH batch payment processes, and they are implementing API solutions for all types of payments, including batch type of ACH payments and also instant payments. So we see that key part of APIs being key part of enablers for instant payments use cases.
And, I think you brought up why it's so important that we have, a faster system. There's people out there, especially during COVID, that, need to pay and also get paid. And often it quickly, especially in the gig economy, the delivery drivers, the key workers, and various sort of people who need money fast, to go about their daily lives. So it's good to see that we have systems and infrastructures globally that have been able to mobilize themselves during this difficult period. Ian, would you like to? What have you seen? What have you seen? Use cases that have most impressed you in this area?
Yeah, I echo the rest of the panel. I've seen a number of opportunities, especially around in the retail space. But also, I think you just touched on something there. Emergency payments. Certainly, one of the companies I advise on issues compensation payments to airlines. We can imagine what's happened over the last few months in that sector, where People are stuck in different airports. Airlines are starting, stopping within the same day and not quite sure where they are. So instant payments, where the airline can put money into your hand in seconds, but then also can take it back because it's their money. If they're trying to get you to substance or offer you sort of travel for drinks or full compensation. So I've seen huge opportunities in the airline sector and where there's compensation has to be issued within seconds. And I think that will continue, and COVID's enhanced that. I think instant payments obviously driven a lot of that, but certainly COVID. And I also would touch on the points you made there. A lot of this is down to the CX. I mean, we can get all the back end perfect and instant payments, but the customer experience is everything. And I think that's where the fintechs are really coming to their own. If they can make it embedded into the app day one, so the customer journey is nice and easy, then you're going to see the adoption curve really increase. And I think that's the key to it. It's the back end infrastructure, I think, is starting to get there. You're right. But the CX is going to be critical to this. It's got to be a simple customer journey. There's still compliance issues involved. And that's what I've been seeing out there. People that can get the customer journey right, the CX right, can really take advantage of instant payments.
There's some incredible things going on, that enable us to have a much better idea of where our payments are at what time and when we're likely to receive them. And also help us manage the well-being of our finances as well, from the tools that the fintechs are bringing through as a result of open banking. We can't really have this conversation without talking about the pandemic and the impact that's had on instant, real-time and cross-border payments. So I think I'd like to go back to Vikesh and say, Vikesh, what impact have you seen? What anecdotes have you seen that you think people would be interested in here?
Yeah, and it is a difficult time, and I think before launching into it, the pandemic itself is just first and foremost just a terrible kind of human tragedy when you think about the loss of life and the suffering and pain that most people have had to either through people they know, and you don't need to look very far to kind of see someone maybe who's had to suffer and hopefully recover from it. But actually, when we look at kind of what that means and where I think where it could take us in terms of the financial industry and payments, I think from my experience and from what Swift are working on, it's a redoubling of what we were working on. The need for traceability, frictionless experience, seamless cross-border experience as it is for instant schemes. That's something we have strived for, and we will continue to do so, and we'll do so with more vigor and pace over the coming months and years. That is through the use cases I've spoke about with GPI itself evolving, but also APIs, and Myles spoke about it. It was talked about earlier on as well. We are investing heavily in APIs and have done for a while. We see that technology here today, that means of communication, the flexibility it offers the developer, the organizations to communicate, not just within their own estate, but across each other. And we see that with open banking. Swift last year, we had nearly 1 billion API calls on the network. That channel in terms of the exposure of Swift services to customers, but also innovation in exposing third-party APIs with the security and resiliency of the network is increasingly taking traction and really interesting use cases. I see that going on. There is an interesting future, and I don't know, if I could tell the future, I think, I'd be probably putting some money on the national lottery later this week. But, there is a interesting kind of dynamic around digital versus physical cash. And in the UK, we saw the access to cash review last year. I think, no one could ever feel that we would be having the year we've had. Does that change the recommendations there? Where do we see some of that kind of dynamic moving, and are we ready for some of those volumes? So no, I think it's going to be an exciting time, and at Swift we're looking to upgrade cross-border so that it is as seamless and efficient as instant.
And I think that real time and instant is a game changer. It moves payments away from just being a utility, but really having a meaningful impact on society during COVID or business models as well. So Perhaps Basak, you'd like to answer that question about, you know, what you've seen during the pandemic and the impact on instant and real-time payments.
Sure, yeah. So during the past few months, we have seen increased payments traffic in terms of specifically coming from online marketplaces, ads, and also subscription platforms such as streaming services, as we all know, right? During the pandemic, we've taken up more subscriptions to pass time. And also the pandemic has been a wake-up call for some companies who have neglected their online presence. So they have shifted their focus to build up their online capabilities, to go direct to consumer, to enable online payments, etc. So we've seen a really greater focus from these companies. And other things like online chat and video applications. Again, the use of these platforms have increased massively over the past few months. And with that, these companies have focused their attention to make efficient payments to content developers, right? So these content developers are creating content for, you know, online video apps, and they get paid. And enabling these content developers to get paid instantly is a great use case as well. So we've seen companies taking up instant payments for payments to content developers. And for marketplaces, the interesting thing has been that, you know, over the past years, marketplaces have focused on how to get payments in. And payments out to suppliers have not been a huge focus, and that has changed as well, because with the pandemic as well, the need to pay suppliers and sellers on marketplaces has increased. So they need to get paid faster, quicker, so they can meet demand for more purchases. So again, instant payments is a key aspect there to support those payments to merchants. So those use cases have been amplified during the pandemic.
So, you know, we could say that instant and real-time payments has really been, you know, the lifeblood flowing through the pandemic, and, you know, has really come into its own during this period. What have you seen at Modulr, Myles?
It's some very similar themes in that I think the way I describe it is supporting the digital transformation that we've talked about, and faster payments being and instant payments being an enabler, and making that big shift that we've been seeing prior to this, but accelerating it, of how payments now become core, the opportunity to embed payments in platforms versus being payments historically perhaps being thought of as an afterthought or a bolt-on after the product's been designed. This opportunity to embed payments in the core of a platform so that it's part of the user journey, part of the user experience, and enables it to be an enabler. And that's what we're seeing. And I think the pandemic's impact on that as we've just, been talking about, has accelerated that and enabling people, or encouraging, or perhaps even forcing people to make faster decisions about that transformation. And we're seeing that across a number of different industries, whether it be property, for example, and new property platforms, and being able to collect payments from tenants and being able to push that through agencies to landlords, automating that and embedding it within property management, property rental platforms, or whether it be accountants and supporting particularly regional small accountants that have obviously had to move out their offices, work remotely, using digital services where payments are embedded into their accounting software, so that they can manage that through the cloud versus having to have desktop services that they might have historically had. So all of those have been enabled by instant payments.
Wonderful. And Ian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, no, I think it's been a huge stimulus for digital banking, especially established businesses. It's been a huge wake-up call for people like the building societies and credit unions that rely on branches heavily for their traffic and payments of cash outs, and for the vulnerable. So I think, suddenly it was a wake-up call to say, well, we haven't got any branches. How quickly can we put instant payments into action? And one thing they found out very quickly was you can't manufacture cards within 10 seconds. If you want a new lot of cards, it takes a few months. So I think it's driven the whole, digital payment play. And they've all woken up to, rather than we'll get round to becoming a digital payments player, or we'll get round to having our own app. It's a must now, it's essential. And that's right through from building societies, pawnbrokers, anyone in the FX bureau play. They've all had a huge wake-up call, and I think it will never be the same. I think they've realised that if you don't do it, you're betting your own company, and you won't be around in a few years. So I think COVID has obviously been a nasty business, but the only silver lining is for the payments industry that it has driven a lot of behaviour that may have taken 2 or 3 years to adopt, that was probably happened in 2 or 3 months.
So we have a new normal, to quote Boris Johnson. But we also have a pace and acceleration that perhaps our industry needed. And as we know, we're still in the thick of this pandemic, and with second waves or being spoken about, who knows the impacts are both good and bad that's going to have moving forward. But I guess my last question to you all is, if we were to get our crystal ball out and look at what's going to happen in the next couple of years, what role are fintechs going to play in the adoption of the use of instant payments, and how is that likely to play out? Maybe Vikesh, you could talk a little bit to that, and maybe about what you're seeing in retail versus trade payments as well.
Yeah, and again, it's always dangerous to kind of comment on the future. I kind of have visions of like B-reel footage of me saying something and in 3 years' time completely being off the mark. Okay, but actually,
politicians, you're right.
But I think, yeah, but I think if I look at let's say the trends, and then see where fintechs and the collaboration can emerge around that. So first and foremost, we've touched on it, but not a huge amount. The bad guys are still out there. So security and resiliency is going to be ever more important, as it has done, maybe even more so, as you move at pace and the uptake of instant payments and the way we're connecting cross-border to instant schemes. Secondly, openness, ecosystems, connectivity of those ecosystems around, in a very open way. I think that closed systems will have, limited durability in the future. You cannot innovate around that in a meaningful way. You cannot bring new innovations into the market. Thirdly, standardization. So 20022, the introduction of that around the world, allows for a common data dictionary to really emerge around the globe, and certainly in meaningful currencies around the world. And we see that kind of journey happening. And actually, as we see that, you can see really interesting new technologies emerging. AI, algorithms, machine learning suddenly take on a new dynamic when you have cleaner data sets underneath them. The experience you can give customers because of that clean, standardized data sets is huge. And lastly, frictionless. Any innovation that reduces frictions, and at Swift we've talked about pre-validation. So looking at kind of some API calls around account information and verifying that. In the UK there is confirmation of payee. Various markets have that. Case resolution is another. Those final bastions of friction within the kind of global payments industry and domestic payment industries really, I think, are going to have to be addressed and will be addressed at pace. So where you can innovate around those areas and you can collaborate and you can get comfortable with this idea of co-opetition, collaboration and competition at the same time in the same organization, I think the opportunities are exciting and endless.
They are. And that, again, a nice sort of good closing remarks from you there, Vikesh. Myles, how would you like to sort of finalise this and sort of summarise what you see for the future and how fintechs play into that?
Yeah, so certainly. So for me, it's definitely more of the same, and hopefully it's a faster pace where we've seen all of the change happening and the digital transformation that we've talked about, and I do hope that will continue. I do hope that the regulators will continue to be supportive, and I think we've seen fantastic change in the UK and also Europe, and I do hope that Europe or UK continues to align with Europe, and we see perhaps further movement in Europe. Potentially, I have a hope that the ECB might follow the Bank of England around direct access for non-bank financial institutions, which would be amazing to see. And also, I agree with Vikesh around data. I think there's still further opportunities for efficiency and control and automation by getting into the data flows, even into what we might consider to be really basic use cases. If you think about remittance advice, for example, that if you're making a payment on a payable side, which obviously becomes then a receivable at the other end, just being able to tell the person with the payment data what you are paying, which invoices you're paying, is it a full invoice payment, a partial invoice payment, so you can automate that process alongside or ideally with the payment transaction data, will enable us to improve it even further. So I think there's been great progress made, but there's still lots more that can be done.
I can, truly say as a small business, applications like that would make our lives so much easier. Definitely getting there, but there's still, a way to go. There's still paper required where it shouldn't be with payments. So, Ian, what would you like to say for your closing comments?
Getting my crystal ball out, yeah. I would. Well, in the short term, I believe, more of the same, but I think probably greater linkages between continents and countries. I think the challenge has always been outside the sort of key domestic markets. How do you link those areas, which has been the challenge? And I think it will get better, but I think it will continue to have its own challenges, especially around costs. Banks tend to be difficult players when they're actually trying to lose income. They don't suddenly run too fast, and that's been always the conundrum of the big players. If you're making lots of money out of the FX and cross-border, it's hard to cannibalize your own business. So that's always going to be an uphill struggle, I think, in the short term, but it will happen over time. In terms of the long term, medium term, I'd like to think blockchain is going to come into its own. Probably niche areas to start with. Areas like trade finance, I think, is a key area with the smart contracts is going to be a big boost. So certainly I've spoken to a number of players in Asia and emerging countries, and they're still struggling to get into the mainstream cross-border infrastructures. So I think cross-border blockchain opportunities will play a part there. Also, it's interesting, early in my career, I spent quite a bit in the cash business. And one thing I learned about central banks was that they make a lot of money out of cash, a thing called senerage, which is a non-interest loan to banks. So all that money in your pocket is actually a loan to the Bank of England and all the central banks around the world. So there's obviously a lot of noise around, will they build their own cryptocurrencies? Will they replicate cash? Because if they don't do something, all that money is going to go to someone else. So it'll be interesting to see how Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies play a part, or do the central banks bring out their own? So in the future, I do see some sort of crypto from the major economies coming into play to keep hold of the economy's cash and certainly not lose all that senerage. That's my future predictions.
Well, I think that's another session in its own right that we should definitely do for PAY360 next year, or maybe if we can do, before it's in some other forum. But I'd like to give the actual final closing remarks to you, Basak. What do you see, and what's your take on fintechs in this space and the adoption of instant payments?
Yeah, so we are seeing various models play out in the payment space, especially as it relates to enablement of online commerce. We are seeing banks enabling fintechs, fintechs enabling other fintechs, and also traditional companies, for example, utility, energy players getting into becoming licensed payment entities, all with a view to getting their consumers more embedded within their ecosystem, services and partners. So I think that trend will continue all big brands and all big players will become payment entities, essentially. And within all of this, we still see banking continuing to be the backbone of financial technology through balance sheet management and risk management. In terms of the future of payments, I think it'll be behavior and choice-based. So whether it's customer push payments or pull payments, or indeed no action, so based on AI-driven patterns enabled in the background. So I think we'll see more of that payments really disappearing in the background. So that would be very interesting to watch, and we'll see how this all plays out in the next few years.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're about out of time now. It's good to end on a note that power was really being transferred from the few to the many, with the fintechs now opening up competition and us getting products that are better for for the consumers and the businesses out there, and instant payments being, you know, something that's really driving that growth as well. So thank you very much to Basak, Vikesh, Myles and Ian. If anybody has any questions, please do put them up. We will be answering them. We're answering them at the end instead of throughout the session. And if any of you want to get in contact with any of us, you'll find us all on LinkedIn. Thank you. Bye-bye.